In this video, we will be reviewing Units 1 through 5 in most of their entirety. We're going to cover most of the major aspects of each unit. So let's go ahead and get started. Music Theory Review. We're going to start in Unit 1, which is talking about meter. Now, meter, we went over four basic vocabulary terms. We went over beat, which is the steady underlying pulse of the beat. Now, what I was talking about that is the beat. If you tap in your toe, listening to a piece of music, and you start tapping your toe, start clapping your hands, start tapping your thigh, something like that, that's the beat that you're feeling. That's the beat that you're inherently tapping out with your foot. So that's your beat. That's the beat that ties all that together. Tempo. Tempo is the speed of the beat. It's the speed of the beat, how fast or how slow the beat or how fast or how slow the song is. Rhythm. It is the longer and shorter sounds and silences that overlay that steady beat. So if you remember talking about a layer cake, beat is the foundation of the cake. That's the bottom layer. Tempo is right on top of that. Rhythm is right on top of that. That's the part that makes it interesting. Might could even call it the frosting of the cake. That's what makes it interesting, because I can have this beat over top of underneath, but then I can also be doing that rhythm that I was doing with my mouth and singing and pitch. That was a rhythm that's over top. That's over top of that. Now, meter. Meter is the organization or the grouping of rhythmic pulses using strong and weak accents. If you remember, we started talking about duple, triple, and quadruple meters. Three types. So duple meter is two pairs of beats tied together. So there's 1, 2, and they're tied together with a strong beat, as you can see by this little accent mark right here on top, and a weak beat because there's no accent mark on the second pulse. That's duple meter, pulses of 2. 1, 2, or strong, weak, weak. Okay? Next is triple meter. That's the musical pulse in sets of 3, as we see indicated by the arrow here. There's groups of 3 notes, with the strong beat being on beat 1, a weak beat on 2, and a weak beat on 3. So it'll be strong, weak, strong, weak, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay? Next one, quadruple, 4, group of 4 notes or beats tied together. Accented by the first beat being the strong beat, the second beat being weak, the third beat being semi-strong, the fourth beat being weak. So we have strong, weak, semi-strong, weak, strong, weak, semi-strong, weak. And again, as accented by this little accent mark here at the top of beat 1. All right, so that's the most of Unit 1. Unit 2, recognizing the staff and recognizing higher and lower pitches. So the staff, all it is 5 lines and 4 spaces onto which music notes are written, as you can see here, indicated by this little arrow here. That's our staff, 5 lines, 4 spaces. The lines and the spaces of the staff are numbered from bottom to top, bottom to top. Key to remember, bottom to top. So we start here at the bottom. Line 1, space 1. Line 2, space 2. Line 3, space 3, so on and so forth. From bottom to top. Line 1 is your foundation line of your staff. Line 5 is your ceiling. That's the roof, the roof of your house. Okay, so gotta remember that. Okay. Now, notes, all they are, they're oval-shaped symbols that represent musical sounds called pitches. They're just a written form of music. They're just symbols symbolizing different sounds. As we've already learned in a lesson that's in a unit that's going to be upcoming here in just a minute, that each of these notes is shaped with this little black oval head here, and a stem, or just a hollow out oval. That's our whole note here. This is our quarter note. This is our half note, which we'll get to in a upcoming unit review, part of this review here. These notes are placed on the staff, either on the lines or in the spaces of the staff. They represent the pitches of the staff. The lower the pitch is on a staff, the lower the pitch. The higher it is on a staff, the higher the pitch. So we remember that. Remember this. This pitch is lower this second pitch that's indicated here is higher than the first. So if it's up higher on the staff, it's a higher in pitch, higher frequency of sound. The lower it is on the staff, the lower the pitch. So if we go higher on the staff, high pitches, or lower on the staff, low on the staff. Okay, so that's how you can remember that. Now pitch. Pitch is how high or how low a tone or note sounds to the human ear. How that sound wave vibrates. Is it at a higher frequency or at a higher rate of vibration, or is it a lower rate of vibration? The lower the rate of vibration of the sound wave, the lower the pitch. The higher the rate of vibration, the faster that wave vibrates, the higher the pitch. So that's what pitch is. Okay, ledger lines. Sometimes the staff is not enough to be able to write all the notes onto it that we need to, because obviously we have more than just 9 notes, 5 lines, 4 spaces. So how do we get higher pitches that go beyond the staff? We write in a ledger line. They're short lines which are added to extend the range of the staff when notes are too low or too high to be written on the staff. Talking about how low or high the pitch is. So that's Unit 2. Unit 3, pitch and timbre. We go in a little bit more detail about pitch. So again, we remember that pitch is how high or how low a tone is to the human ear. Pitch is determined by the frequency, which is the rate of the vibration of the sound wave. The speed at which the sound travels from whatever is causing the sound to cross through the air to your ear and vibrate your eardrum and your corresponding parts of your inner ear, causing the signal to be sent to your brain, recognizing it as a sound. The rate at which a vibration occurs that constitute a sound wave is a frequency. The slower and wider the vibration wave, as we see here, slower and wider. See how much wider it is from this point to this point here? The lower the pitch is. So this would be a low frequency, a low pitch. The faster and shorter the rate of vibration wave is, the higher the frequency. The higher the pitch. Okay, we measure frequency in hertz, H-E-R-T-Z, or shorthand capital H, lowercase z, which is vibrations per second. So this would be a low hertz frequency. This would be a high hertz frequency. Now we give an example of this, a pitch that we call pitch A, according to our musical note names, which we'll learn about in an upcoming lesson as well here in this review. The pitch A440 sounds like this. This pitch is vibrating at a sound frequency of 440 hertz, 440 vibrations per second. So every 440 seconds, that sound is vibrating against your ears, and that's the pitch that you hear. So the lower the vibration rate, the lower the pitch. So if we were to lower this pitch, say cut it in half, we would lower it to A220. This would be A220. You hear the pitch is lower because the frequency is lower. I can cut it even lower. This would be A110. This is hitting your ear at 110 vibrations per second. Okay, so you can even double it. So the higher the vibration rate, the higher the pitch. So now I'm going to go back up to A440, and I'm going to double it. I'm going to go to A880. You double it, it's the same pitch, but it's at a higher frequency. It's just doubled. Now I'm going to double it again. Again, that pitch is hitting your eardrum and vibrating at a rate of 400, or depending on which one it is. If we go back to A440, 440 vibrations per second. So that is the difference. That is what a pitch is. That's what pitch is. We recognize it through frequency. Okay? So going on here. Now, you'll notice that the frequency, sometimes you'll hear a note or you'll hear a pitch played or sung by 2 different instruments or 2 different singers. Timbre is a word in order to describe what it sounds like to hear the same pitch sung or played by different instruments or by different people. The timbre of the instrument, the timbre of the voice, is what colors and characterizes the tone so that you can tell the difference between a trumpet playing A440 and a guitar playing A440, or a male singing A440, or another male singing A440. You can hear the differences in the way they color it, in the way they shape their vowels, shape their mouth, as far as for singers, shape the mouth, the placement of the tongue in the mouth, the openness of the mouth. That all describes timbre. It also is called tone color. This allows us, again, to be able to differentiate between two different singers or instruments singing or playing the same pitch. That's all timbre is, the quality of the sound. Now, solfege and scales, Unit 4. This gets us into being able to actually start to read music. A scale is the tonal basis of music, a specific pattern of tones from which you can build melodies and harmonies. Okay, so a scale. This is starting on scale. That's an 8-note scale. That's a scale, going from C, note name C, to higher note name C. Some of the key characteristics are notes are ordered according to their pitches from lowest to highest. So this is low C, this is high C. If you were to hear the pitch, we call the note C. Okay? So they're named for the first note or the tonic of the sequence. So if I were to start in the key, if I were to start on A440, I could play the key of A440, which is a specific pattern of notes and of notes and intervals between each note, characterizing that particular key. It's also called a key, the scale. The particular scale is called a key as well. Now, if I were to start on A440, I would end on A880, and it would sound like this. That's from A440 to A880. So you would name that the key of A major. That's the key of A major. So again, it's named for the first note on which it starts. Okay? Now, scale degrees. It's a name for each note of the scale. That's what a scale degree is. There are 7 scale degrees with the tonic, number 1, being repeated on the top. So that's the note name we see. So if we start on A would be our tonic. That would be number 1 according to this chart here. Okay? So low A is low 1, low tonic. High number 1 would be high A if we were to say the scale or the key of A. So there's 7 scale degrees or notes in a scale. First scale degree, called the tonic, is repeated on top. Okay, you can use numbers here as represented here on this chart. You can use numbers, but we're going to learn more about solfege syllables. You can also call them by their pitch names. Each pitch name has each pitch has a specific name. Now we just give them these names. There's a reason for why we have this system here, but we're not going to get into that details just yet. Okay, we'll get into those in a little bit later. But we have 7 pitch names, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. That's our musical alphabet. This same pattern, exactly as it's shown here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This pattern will repeat forever and ever and ever. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are the only letters you have to know for the musical alphabet. These are the basic names for them. Again, this pattern repeats forever regardless of which note that you start on. So if I were to start on the note of C, I would just continue that pattern from there. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And repeating with C on top, ending with C. You could do it for G. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You could end it there. You could end it on B. Start on B and end on B. B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. The pattern repeats itself forever and ever, regardless of which note name you start on. Okay? And that first note name that we start on, pitch name, is the tonic. It's the first and last note of the scale. It's the foundation note or the home tone. So for now, we're going to indicate the tonic will be indicated by a solid-filled black box, either in a line or on a line or in a space. Either one. If you see that little black box, that's where your tonic is. That's where your first note is going to start. Okay, that's your home tone, home note to start on. Okay, now solfege introduces a system of 12 syllables because there's many different flavors of notes. There's actually 12 different types of notes, just like there is, as I used an example in class, different types of ice cream. It's still ice cream, but it's different flavors. So you have vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, all those different variations, but it's still ice cream. The system of pitches that we use includes that as well. Each basic note name, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, has different flavors, and we'll get into those in a future lesson. But solfege has 12 syllables. Right now we're only going to deal with the basic 7. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and do. High do on top above you, right at your head level. Low do at your waist. I'm putting it on camera just so you can see it here. I'm putting it on my chest now just for you can see it on the camera. But low, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. So each of these syllables gives the note, each note or pitch of the scale, its own unique syllable, which is used to recognize and sing that note or pitch every time that appears on the staff. So if you see a symbol on the staff that looks like a note, and it's on that line that we saw previously, beside this line right here. So if my little laser pointer dot is, let's say it represents a note, that laser dot would be the tonic. That would be the note that starts on tonic. That would be our do. Okay, so that's what that means. Okay, and we use the hand signs because that gives you a kinesthetic, a muscle memory to be able to use to remember what that pitch is, to remember what that syllable is. So that gives you a muscle movement that helps your brain not only hear the pitch, remember the syllable, but it also gives a muscle movement for it to be able to remember it as well. That's what we call a kinesthetic movement. Okay, now we're going to get in the first part of Unit 5, which is the parts of a note and note values, because in music different notes represent different lengths of time with which to hold a pitch. So for quarter and half notes, which we'll introduce in just a second, they all have the main parts. All notes have these two main parts. They either have just a note head, which is right here. It's indicated by this little symbol here. Note head is just that little round part of the note. That's a note head. Some notes can be just a note head. Some notes, most of the notes you'll see will have a stem attached to it. The stem, which is this line right here, as indicated by my laser pointer right there, the stem helps to differentiate between notes other than a whole note. Which a whole note, which we've already seen up to this point, is just a solid, it's a ring-shaped note. It's just a ring-shaped note all by itself. We'll show it to you in just a minute here. That stem helps to differentiate between a whole note and any other note. Now the note head, again down here at the bottom of the note, can either be filled in completely black, or it can be as you see it on the screen. It's white, so what we call a white note, because there's no there's no coloration inside of it. Okay, that note head helps to differentiate between half notes and quarter notes. So this note that we see right here is a half note. We'll get into that in just a second. So note values, it's also called note duration. Some things you got to remember about note values. These note values are symbols. Again, they are simply to tell you how long to hold a pitch. The length of time that a note is played or sung is determined by the type of note it is. And we'll get into those in just on the next slide, actually. While the placement of the notes on the staff indicates pitch, where it is on the staff indicates how high the pitch is or how low the pitch is, or if it's a high or low pitch, excuse me. The duration of the note, how long the note is held, holding a pitch, is determined by the note value. What type of note is written on the page? What note symbol's on the page? Okay, so for note values, we're going to start with a whole note, because a whole note means you're going to hold a pitch for the entirety of that measure, which is just these five. If there was a line right here and a line right here on these on this staff right here, that would be a measure. That would be just one segment of a musical line. Okay, and we'll get into talking about measures in just a second. But a whole note is this note right here. It's this symbol. It's just a donut. Think of it as a donut right there on the staff. It gets 4 beats, and it is held for the entire length of that measure. It has an empty white note head, but no stem. No stem. So that's a whole note. If it looks like a little hole, that's your whole note. Okay. Half notes. Half note gets 2 beats. So if the whole note gets 4 beats, The half note's got to be half of something. It's half of the whole note. So the half note gets 2 beats. That should be easy to remember because half the value of a whole note, it's, as I said, it's half the value of the whole note. It has an empty white head, white note head, just like that. So but it has a stem attached to it. So it's closely related to the whole note, but because it has this stem attached to it, that makes it different. It's not a whole note. It actually turns it into a half note. And we see here, we have 1 whole note. You divide that into 2 half notes. You can divide that because this gets 2 beats, this gets 2 beats of that full whole note value worth of beats. Again, this is how long you're going to be holding a pitch, okay? So now we're going to break it down even further. Each one of those half notes can divide down into 2 quarter notes. So this is 1 quarter note, this is a quarter note, this is a quarter note. All 4 of these are quarter notes, and it gets 1 beat. Okay, and if you notice the quarter note, the black head, the note head is filled in solid black. That's how you can tell the difference between a quarter note as this and a half note such as this. Okay, so again, basic division. You have 4 of something, divide it by 2, you get 2. 2 and 2. You divide 2 by 2, you get 1. Okay, so it's based on basic mathematics here. Okay, this is where music becomes more mathematical. Okay, so now we're going to show you a chart that shows you these divisions. So we see here we have our whole note, which if you divide it, cut it in half, you'd end up with 2 half notes. So here's 2 halves. Okay, if you divide each of these half notes into 2, they would each divide into 2 quarter notes, just like that. So now we have 4 quarter notes. So that tells us that 4 quarter notes equals the same amount of time as 2 half notes, but also equals the same amount of time as a whole note. Okay? All the notes get their names, as it says here in the text, from the relationship with the whole note. However it's related to the whole note, that determines what type of note name it gets. So 4 quarters make a whole. There's 4 quarters in a whole note. Okay? So think of it like the division, again, of a US dollar. We have $1, which would be our whole note. You divide it in half, half of its value. You have 2 quarter notes. These would be 2 50-cent pieces, 2 50-cent piece coins. And if you were to divide those by 2 again, both of those, you'd get 4 quarter notes. So there's 4 quarters in a dollar. Same thing as there's 4 quarters in a whole note. Okay? Instead of dealing with money, you're dealing with time, how long to hold a pitch. And we would sing these like this. I'm going to sing this whole note on A 220, and I'm going to hold it for 4 beats. So 1, 2, ready, here it is. Da. Now because it's a whole note, that means you just hold that pitch. Now I'm going to sing the 2 half notes. Because the 2 half notes are there, that means that we hold it for 2 beats on a single tone, and then we repeat it again for the last 2 beats of the 4 beats together, okay? So this is what the 2 half notes would sound like. 1, 2, ready, and da, da. So we'd hold it for 4 beats, but you repeat the note after the first 2 beats. So you have da, 2, da, 4, off. Okay, if I were to sing and speak the notes of the pitches at the same time. So now here's our quarter notes. Now because we have 4 of them, we reiterate that pitch every beat, every time we have a beat. So here's our count off. 1, 2, here's the quarter notes. Da, 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 da. You reiterate that pitch every beat, every beat. Okay, so now Unit 5. Talking about rests and time signatures. Rests and time signatures. We have our silences in music, but we also we have our pitches in music. So we have these notes. So Mary had a little lamb. Each one of those pitches. But we also have our silences, the rests, which the rests can be used to indicate possibly communicate a type of message that the song wants to get, or it could try to, in a piece where there are multiple instruments, try to silence the other instruments so that only certain other instruments can be heard and played at the same time. or can be heard over top of the others, excuse me. They can stand out because they either have a solo or some other type of message that the composer wants to play. Same thing goes for singers. Sometimes an entire section or the entire choir is silent so that a soloist can stand out. All the other musicians have a rest. They are resting. They are not making any noise. So that's what a rest is. And this is just a symbol here. This is, I should have deleted this because this is actually a wrong type of note. This note does not exist. Not with this note head anyway. But anyway, we'll get into that later. But rests. Each rest, if you think of it, is just like the notes. Okay, think of them as two sides of a coin. You have the note, which has a pitch on one side. On the opposite side of the coin is the silence. So they are equal to each other, but they do different things. So a whole rest is the opposite of a whole note because you are silent for 4 beats. Means you're silent for four beats. Now we can remember this whole note here because it kind of looks like a hole in the ground. So if you were to walk along this line 4 right here where my laser pointer is here, if you were to just walk along, dee, 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 oh, I come across this hole. Ah, I fall into the hole. So you can think of it as falling into a hole. So a whole note. And it's always hanging on from that 4th line. So remember, we count up from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. Line 4. Okay, so counting up from the bottom, so remember it's going to be hanging on, the whole rest is hanging on to line 4. Now, we have another type of rest called a half rest. You got to have just like corresponding half note, you have a corresponding half rest. Okay, now technically we should have 2 of these in this measure, but for right now there's only 1 shown here. But think of it like a half rest. It's a whole note that lost its grip and it fell down onto line 3, and it's going to be sitting on line 3 for its entire life. That's where it stays. That's where its home is. Okay, and it looks like if you were to cut the line on either side of the rest, it would kind of look like a little top hat. So remember, the half rest gets 2 beats. 2 beats. And again, there should be 2 of these half rests in here to indicate 2 beats and 2 beats for the 4 beats of the whole note. But for this picture, it just doesn't have it in there, so I apologize for that. But half rest, 2 beats. It is half of the whole rest. It's half of the whole rest. Okay? Now, each of these, as I just said before, the whole rest kind of looks like a hole in the ground. If you were to fall into that hole walking along this line, you'd fall into the hole. Now, the half rest again looks like a little top hat. That's what they look like. All right, now we also have a quarter rest, which receives 1 beat of silence. And it looks somewhat like if you took the letter Z right here. So you have a Z and then a C right there, just kind of like stacked on top of each other. So this whole rest gets 1 beat. And there are 4 of them in relation to a whole note, or whole rest, excuse me, okay? So as I said before, each rest has its same value as its corresponding note, and they're called exactly the same thing. So we have our whole note here, here's our whole rest. Our half note, here's our half rest. Our quarter note, here's our quarter rest. They all have, they're the exact opposite of each other, the yin and the yang, parts of each other. Now, just as I said before, each one of these rests gets 1 beat. The quarter rest gets, if we're talking about quarter rest, the quarter rest gets 1 beat. So each of these silence rests indicate the amount of silence each beat has. So for the quarter rest here, again, it's equal to 1 beat of silence. So if we were to play this exercise here, we have the beats counted underneath it, it would sound like this. 1, 3, or we would do da, da. So let me tap off this beat here underneath it. 1, 2, ready, and da, da. So every time there was a silence, all you heard was the beat underneath it. Okay, so that's a quarter rest. Half rests have 2 beats of silence. So if we were to play the second exercise here, as indicated by my laser pointer right there, it would sound like this. 1, 2, ready, and da. So 2 beats of silence. Now for the whole rest, it's just silence all the way through. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now when I say for to clap and count these rhythms, this is how I want you to do it. I want you to clap on the beat and pulse your hands open on the rest. So for this first example, it would sound like this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now normally you would be silent on the rest, but you can also count out, if I ever want you to count out the beats, I want you to say that 2 so that you'll know that that 2 is right there. That's the second beat. That's second or whatever beat that the rest falls on. So for the second exercise, it would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now because this a half note here is holding a pitch, we clap on the very first beat, starting the pitch. We're holding that pitch, so we hold our hands, and then on the silences, the rest, we open and pulse for the remaining 2 beats. Okay? So then for the whole rest, we just have 1, 2, 3, 4, or just the silences. So, all right, so that's the rests. That's the difference, the connection between rests and notes. Now, subdivision is just how many each smaller rhythmic value fits into the rhythmic value. We have been subdividing each of these notes, or each of these rests, either way. So you can see that the 4 quarter notes is a subdivision of a whole rest. So if we think of this second level right here, the half rests, that would be the division. The quarter notes here would be a subdivision because it is under the division level. So this just shows you the relationship between the rests. Same thing goes for notes. This is a subdivision of a whole note. That's all these divisions are, subdivisions of that. Okay, now each of these divisions is going to be important because it helps us to, again, figure out how long to hold a note. But if you look on a piece of music, they're all grouped together in small groups. Time signatures tell you how many notes to be able to group together in small little chunks. If you've ever heard the story or heard the phrase, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. Okay, same thing with music. How do you read or play a piece of music? 1 measure at a time, 1 note at a time. All right, so each of these numbers here is called a time signature and is a set of 2 numbers stacked on top of each other that appears at the beginning of a piece of music or an exercise. These time signatures are also an easy way to help you indicate the meter of music. So remember we had in our exercises where I had you guys try to listen to a piece of music and figure out what the meter is, what the meter of each song was. This is an easy way to figure it out because it's right there on the sheet music. If you have the sheet music, you can see exactly, oh, this is in triple, or this is in quadruple, or this is duple. So if you see the 3, that means it's in triple. You see the 2, it's a duple meter. If you see a 4, that means it's a top 4 on top. All these numbers on top indicate the meter of the piece. So what does the bottom number tell us? So, well, the upper number tells how many beats or counts are in a measure or grouped together. So in this case, we have 2 beats per measure, 3 beats per measure, or 4 beats per measure, indicated by my laser pointer. The lower number down here indicates what type of note will receive 1 beat. So if there's a 4 on the bottom, remember 4 is also another word for quad, or can also be used the word quad. 4 indicates that a quarter note will be the note that receives the beat. So if you see a 3-4, that means there's going to be 3 quarter notes per measure, at least worth of time. Okay? So that's what a time signature does. Now, as again, quarter notes are equal to 1 count of beat in this 4/4 time, especially. So we have the 4 tells us there's 4 beats per measure. The bottom 4 tells us that there's quarter note is what is getting the beat, as we see here in this exercise. And we would sing this thusly. Ta, 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 ta. That's how we would sing that. We would say that syllable and sing that pitch each time. We would reiterate that pitch each time on the beat. Okay? And you would clap and count it just like this. If you were to count with the beat numbers, you would count it as this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you could do 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I asked you to clap and count something, I'll probably have you sing it on neutral syllable. So I'll say sing it on neutral syllable da. Da, 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 da. Or any other kind of neutral syllable that I tell you to sing. It could be ba, ta, whatever. Okay, it could be anything. So this helps to facilitate, to help facilitate singing a quarter note, you would say the syllable ta at the same time you clap the beat. Now for half notes, you would say ta on the downbeat, which is the strong beat or the weak beat, whichever beat reiterates the pitch. So in this case, for the half notes, you would say ta, ta. You would hold that vowel because you're holding that pitch. Now if we were to sing this, it would sound like this. Ta, ta. And we would pulse those held pitches there, okay? So you can help to sing those like that. Now, whole notes, you would hold that vowel all the way through. Ta. If I were to clap and count that, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And you would hold the beats like that, okay? So I hope this review helps you to remember everything we've gone over thus far from Units 1 all the way through to Unit 5. It's been quite a bit of information, so I hope this helps you to remember all of this information, because this is information that you're going to need to know for the next step in learning music, which is going to actually be able to see it on a piece of music, see it on a piece of paper, see these symbols, and recognize them immediately, saying, oh, I know exactly how long to hold this, I know exactly how many beats are in this measure, and I know exactly how I can sing this. This is the first steps to learning to read music.